So I just had an idea about this video that I wanted to make, and I haven't really thought it through. I turned on the video and decided to think about this in real time with you. So who knows what will happen? Who knows if I'll share it? But I think there's something interesting in there. So let's see. So, one of the really fun and interesting things about working one to one with non duality and awakening and presence, as opposed to speaking to a large group of people or on YouTube to people that I don't know. One of the really interesting things about working one to one is that you get to see in real time the ways how people are experiencing awareness, and more than experiencing awareness, how they understand it. So, how they make sense of this, okay? And I was observing two different clients I had in the last week. And so the first one suffers from, not suffers, but has a tendency to be quite detached in life. And this is partly why she came to me in the first place. There's a sense that you're not alive, fully engaged with life, and there's a bit of a gap and a distance, and you're kind of detached and not very engaged, with life, with your emotions, with how you feel about things, with your preferences. And, that's obviously a protection of some sort that she must have developed early on in life. We're just now looking into that because it's useful to see where these kind of tendencies originate. But that's her tendency, that's her presentation. And so when we looked at awareness and presence and did some, guided meditation, small guided meditations around it, just to sort of go directly to the experience consciously for her, she was clearly getting it, so to speak. And by getting it, I mean speaking from her direct recognition in that moment. And I know that because she doesn't follow spiritual teachers, she doesn't follow non duality, she's not particularly familiar with the lingo, so to speak. But the words that were coming out of her mouth as we were sort of in that guided meditation together were clearly words of somebody who was speaking from direct experience in that moment. And so she was very clear about awareness and the difference between awareness and thinking, and the fact that, and she also reported feeling more relaxed as we were working with this, and noticing, even the benefits, the physiological benefits of this kind of investigation and recognition. And then towards the end of the session, that detached mode kind of slipped in again. I would argue that it had never really fully gone away, but it had gone away enough for her to recognize presence directly. But then towards the end, it kind of really slipped in again. And she started to say things that didn't really seem to honor the realization she had just had. And it was like she wasn't placing a lot of value onto what had just been seen. And, she even said things like, yeah, I've heard this stuff before, or I know about this, and so what? There was a kind of so whatness. And I was like, so what? There's nothing more profound here in this life to see. And this is you, this is your nature, this is everything we ever look for, which is peace and, just the beingness of life itself. And so that was interesting. And then I used that in some ways to go back to this detachment and to see how this detachment had actually sort of taken this message, which was alive for her, and made it into another concept, and a concept that wasn't very, very valued, even though she says she wants this recognition more than anything else. And then this other client who does not have this detached, part of her, and who has a more anxious predisposition and presentation, we went into the guided meditation. She was able to immediately recognize presence, but because of this other sort of more anxious tendency, the value that was placed on this, and the importance of this recognition and the magnitude of it was her understanding of what had just been seen. And so she went towards the end of that session, she started saying things like, oh my God, this is too big, and ooh, can I see you soon, because this is a lot. And my intervention there was a very different intervention from the other client. And my intervention was, look, when you were in the direct recognition, you were just being, and it was very, there was a calmness to you. And then the mind took that conceptually, and now it's something that is even bordering on scary. And it's so useful to see that that's what your thoughts are doing now, are sort of scaring you away from this recognition, which is what the mind often does anyway, in one way or another. And when she saw that, so my job in that situation was to sort of bring it back to the very ordinary nature of presence, and the fact that it is already who she is, and it is already here, and it's just a matter of settling into that and becoming familiar more and more with this presence. But the ordinariness of this being, the simplicity of it, was what I invited her to notice, in order for her to wake up from that sort of story that she was starting to tell herself about how scary this is, And so how amazing that how in these two examples, one client sort of detached from it and minimized the importance of presence, and the other one maximized the importance of presence. And what was helpful for both of them to see was that neither of these were the direct truth of their experience. They were just stories that were starting to develop around this experienceless experience that is who and what you are. And this is the usefulness, of working one-to-one with these things, because these little traps, if we can call them that, can be seen through in real time, and one can go back, so to speak, to the directness of what is being realized, which is your true nature, which isn't too big or too small or too scary or too insignificant. It just is. And the direct experience of that is a whole other story, so to speak. Thank you so much. Let's see if I'm sharing this.